So, welcome everyone to another Empathy Week webinar. I'm very, very pleased and proud to have Matt Crabtree on the show today, who is going to give us some pearls of wisdom and some inspiration, hopefully. I know Matt because I was introduced to him through Neelemma, who is one of our advisors and board members at Empathy Week. And Matt has just got so much expertise in the executive space, the leadership space. I've learned a lot from talking to him. And he was one of the youngest senior executives at Barclays at the age of 31. I'm going to be quizzing him on that journey, how he's done that. But now he is the founder of Positive Momentum, which is a consulting company that work with executive teams across the world. And we're going to delve into talk about particularly empathy and how that can be used in senior executive teams and business, but also in your personal life. So welcome, Matt. Thank you for joining us.
Ed, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me as part of the event and part of the program.
Not at all. I might also add that you are an Empathy Week ambassador as well, which is always great to have. So let's start at the beginning, because I've just alluded that you're in Barclays and you're a senior executive, but your career didn't start out like that. And so I want to just tweak the story and what is in people's minds. How did your career start? What did you want to be when you're older? And then how did you move into the corporate world?
Sure. So, listen, the truth is what I wanted to be when I was a kid was a tractor driver. And the reason I wanted to be a tractor driver was because I was born on a farm and I spent the first 20 years of my life in agriculture. And really that was the pinnacle of my ambition, was to drive big tractors. That was really what it was about for me.
And, every boy's dream.
Every boy's dream, right? And I was, I was growing up on a farm and I could do that kind of thing. Trouble was the farm wasn't my family's farm. My dad ran a farm for another family. And so there was no family farm to go back to. And so I went to agricultural college and I studied sort of agriculture, but I met some people at college who I got on with. I was never the most gifted academically, frankly, quite far from it. But I met some people at college who really sort of inspired me that I could do different things with my life. And so I went into sales because that's often what people do when they're not entirely sure what they want to do, but can talk to people and like other people. And I like other people. So I found myself in a sales job in my early 20s in central London. I come from the rural West Midlands, so I didn't know my way around central London much. My boss told me on my first day to go to the Strand. I didn't know where that was, but anyway, I sort of found it in the end. And I worked my way up corporate life, and as you've said very generously, over 10 years my career moved very quickly, and that was not because I was especially gifted as a business person. I could do the jobs that I did, and I was hardworking, and I committed myself and all that kind of stuff. But I know now that what I was good at doing was building really productive relationships with people, and that's much more unusual than you might think it is. The skill of being able to do that with a whole range of people from a whole range of different backgrounds is rarer than you might think. And so yeah, that's what happened. I changed companies a few times. I was in telecoms and technology for a while, and then, as you say, latterly in my corporate career, I was at Barclays. One of the youngest senior execs. There were a lot of senior execs at Barclays, to be very clear. So, out of the top 1,000, I should think I was probably number 999. But nonetheless, I was in a pretty big job at a pretty young age.
Amazing. I think one of the things that probably sticks out in my mind is that people would think, okay, you are very academically clever, you are gifted at the job, etc., etc. But as you've alluded to, it's the people side of things. Do you think that is still underestimated, how good people are and the importance of being able to build relationships? And also, how were you good at that? Do you think it was natural, or do you think there were elements of your childhood or your early career that actually made you into a good relationship builder?
I think it's underestimated at certain stages of people's careers. So I think the reality is, as you know, and for those who are watching and who, you know, are thinking about what they do in their future, and, you know, might be thinking about a career in a business, and might have big ambitions to be a boss and to work your way up the career ladder, you get to a point where that isn't underestimated, where it becomes hugely important. Normally, as soon as you start to be in any sort of people leadership job, then then it's really estimated. But the truth is, in any kind of job, in any kind of organization, the ability to be able to get on with people from completely different backgrounds, with completely different views and completely different behaviors, is absolutely fundamental to your career success. Not only is it fundamental to your career success, it's fundamental to your success, you know, in that organization. And whether you're a nurse, a police officer, a salesperson, you know, you're working in a retail environment, you're working in a financial services environment, doesn't matter what it is, we have to cooperate with people. And the people who are able to cooperate well, over time, do a better job, and therefore, hopefully over time, get recognized for that, and sometimes asked to do bigger jobs if that's what you want, if that's your thing. It's not everybody's thing, and that's absolutely fine. The academic side of things, you know, listen, let me be really clear. You know, teachers who are watching, you know, I want to reassure you, I think the academics are desperately important, and it's competitive out there. And so you need to prove that you can learn stuff, you can apply stuff, that you understand how the world operates. So it really matters. It's just not the only thing that matters. It's kind of like your ticket to the party. But once you're in the party, that academic qualification, it's not what keeps you there. It might be what gets you there, but it definitely isn't what keeps you there. Your ability to collaborate, as it's popularly called, with other human beings who sometimes got quite wacky behaviors, your ability to be able to cooperate with people in a range of environments, it's really fundamental, and it holds some people back. I've watched it for nearly 30 years. I've watched incredibly gifted people who are brilliant at what they do struggle because they can't collaborate, and they can't, let's put the word out there, it's 7 minutes in, they're not great at empathizing with their colleagues or their customers or any other people who are around them. And it's such a shame, because empathy is a skill, as you know better than anybody. It's a skill. It can be developed. It can be concentrated on, and it must be concentrated on, which is why your mission is so fantastic.
Mm. And before we delve more into empathy, I just want to reiterate what you said there about academics. And unfortunately, there's almost results day in the UK. I can't speak for other countries, but there's always, you know, a radio presenter that says, "I didn't do very well. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine." Well, the reality is actually, you're right. You know, academics are vitally important. And I used to say to the students that I taught, they go, "Well, when am I ever going to use trigonometry? Or whenever am I going to need to know the reactivity series and the order of alkali group 1 metals?" And I was just like, it's not necessarily just the content, it's the proof that you can learn something. You know, I'm interested to see, well, did you get straight U's and straight ungraded, or, you know, they're now numbers or whatever, or did you get straight A's, or did you get a few A's? I'd be really interested in people that got a few A's and then failed other things, because it would show me that, well, they're clearly, that's what interests them. But actually it's that ability, because no matter what job you do in the world, my dad always said this to me when I was growing up, is like, you will always hate certain elements, or there'll be bits that are boring, and people want to know, can you do the boring bits and can you learn information? But like you say, once you're there, it is that relationship, it's that building. You know, great, you got 10. There was I can't remember his name now. There was a scientist 8-10 years ago who said he only employed people with 2-1s, which to young students who don't know what that is, it's not the top grade. It's a very good university grade, but it's not the top. And the reason he said was, people with 2-1s generally have done something else at university other than just study. They've either had a part-time job, they've been in the sport, and therefore I can work with them easier. And it causes uproar because people are like, well, how, you need the top scientists. And he was like, no, I need people that I can get along with. And how underrated is that? Do you think it's still underrated? Because you said, okay, once you get to the top, or you get higher up, it's needed. But I feel like some companies still just hire people based on headline results.
I think that's less and less true, Ed. To be honest, I think that revolution that our mission at Empathy Week is part of. I think that revolution is well underway, and I think various events, particularly of the last couple of years, to be honest, have continued to awaken, especially very large corporates, to the reality that academics matter. Right? Let's be really clear. The scientists didn't say, oh, I don't care whether you've got a degree or not. Still said, I want people with 2 1s. Don't care if you haven't got a first, but 2 1s. Plus an interesting person, a person who's shown interest in other activities, who's reached out to their local community or an international community, who's put themselves into situations where they're with people who are not like that, wherever you might be, and has gone and felt that initial discomfort because it's natural, and then the incredible fulfillment of learning about people's lives from a different perspective. And that, it's a muscle. That muscle, if you work it well enough, serves you incredibly well. I've mentioned I grew up in the rural West Midlands, in South Warwickshire, a very, very small world view. My world was particularly undiverse, as you might imagine. And then I go and work, a few short months later in the centre of London in the mid-90s, and my world exploded. And then I started working internationally, and my world exploded. And then I started doing things with communities of people who were not necessarily in big business, and my world view massively broadened. And that, I think, that revolution is well underway. Ed, I know it's not a popular headline grabber, but I do think most organizations are getting an increasingly mature attitude to it, which is why anybody watching this is incredibly smart to focus on their studies. But if that's all you do, if you think that's your only way in, I think you're going to end up being quite disappointed, because, if you're only just in secondary school, by the time you come out of secondary school or further education or whatever you choose to do, this revolution that Ed and his friends are activating is going to be mainstream. And so organizations are going to deliberately, just as the scientific example you chose, deliberately look for people who are well qualified, who've studied, and who also got other interests. One last quick thing. You said a really important thing. I started to slightly hyperventilate when you started to talk about, possibly the periodic table and testing me on these things. So I've only just recovered from that. My slight point I want to make is the beauty of all those subjects, for those of you who are heads in those books right now, is you got to study all these things to find out what excites you. Because isn't it amazing in the world how people are interested in such an incredibly broad range of things? Just an incredibly broad range of things. People want to be nurses, scientists, explorers, academics, managing directors of companies. And it's incredible how we've all got these different interests. Where did those interests start? Probably at school. Probably you studied something and it just really got you going. And you studied and you went, I kind of really like this. This is really fascinating to me. Now, that might not be very much of what you do, but there's something in it. And that's the beauty of the education system, is you lay out this buffet of subjects. And yeah, we got to work through it and we've got to prove that we can pass examinations. But the buffet is the chance to find out, do you like sausage rolls more than cheese and pickle sandwiches? Because if you do, you could have a career in sausage rolls. Daft example, but you get my point.
but I don't think it is anymore. I think that is the sort of thing where you can go, what out now, especially, you can say, what do I love? And you can go and do and create something, a business, just by having people that are interested in what you're interested in. My brother's friend loves foraging mushrooms and has looked on Amazon and was like, there aren't any books, and made these mini books about mushrooms and sells them on Amazon. It's just like passive income, and he does another job. And I think that's such an interesting it's such an interesting time for people, because also what was 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, which was like, okay, what do you do? Which is, a common question I get asked. And I can give you the simple answer. Okay, I'm the founder of Empathy Week and that's it. Or I can say, well, actually, no, but I also do photography and videography and educational consulting and all. And like yourself, you wear many hats, and that is becoming increasingly more and more popular. Whereas before it was like, oh, okay, well, you're a jack of all trades, and actually I'm going to go to a specialist. That is, for me, that's really exciting to know that actually, no, well, you can have all these skills wrapped in one person.
So I think that's true. What I would say also, though, is I think that it is also still completely legitimate to pursue a single vocation with passion. And I think, what we have to be really careful about as educators and in terms of how we engage with young people is to say, you have got loads more options, but nobody's going to judge you if by the time you're 25 you're doing one thing and doing it really well. It's all right. You can go and explore things, but it's not about being the next, Richard Branson or Mark Zuckerberg, or, it's not about that. You could, and I'm with you, Ed, the options are dizzying, but it's also all right to fall in love with something and to pursue it with a passion, a lifelong passion. That's all right too.
Yeah.
It's
At any
okay.
level. At any level. I remember, I think the pressure on people to go to university is huge, and mainly coming from the schools. I remember teaching a student, and he was like, "Actually, I want to be a copper," and I was like, "Go for it." And now I caught up with him about a year ago, and he's now doing a degree through the police force, but for free. They're paying for it. I was like,
amazing,
perfect.
and he's serving the public and serving the world,
Yeah.
and I'm sure his family around him are incredibly proud and good on him. It doesn't make him better or worse than somebody who's got
Exactly.
5-6 different hats, has got an online shop and an Instagram page and a this and that. It doesn't make him better or worse than that person, but he's made a choice, and good on him.
Yeah, something that's fulfilling him. And one of your hats is an educator, because that's what you're going into businesses, you're going into executive companies. What is it you do? And now we're going to get into more empathy wise. Like, how do you go into an organization, maybe fresh? I know you've got got good relationships with lots of them, but a new organization. How do you set yourself up going into that? And how are you using empathy as a tool to understand what they need, and how you can help them through empathy?
Okay, so let me start by saying, my business is a management consulting business, which is an incredibly broad series of things. And so the things we do with organizations are very different depending on what the organization is, helping them to sell more, helping them to be more efficient, helping them to grow in a new market, helping them to launch a new product, helping them to lead their teams better, and so on and so on and so on. Let me narrow the work, though, to the specific area that you're asking about, and I'll do it with an example. So just yesterday, I'm working with a reasonably senior team of leaders in a very large global business. And as part of my work, I spent a couple of hours observing them in a meeting. Now, in pre-pandemic lives, I'd be sitting in a chair at the back of the room, and it'd be probably a little bit awkward. The beauty, one very tiny silver lining to this rotten grey cloud of COVID that we're living through, is that I can turn up in meetings and they know I'm there because I say hello at the beginning, but then I turn my camera off and I just observe. And what I'm looking for is, how good are these leaders at working with each other? Where's the issues? Where are the people who in truth don't really like each other? Where are the people who are not listening to each other? Where are the people who think, well, I've done my bit, so now I'll not pay any attention anymore and go on to email? And I can see them, I mean, there's the beauty with this technology. I can, I'm not participating in the meeting, so I sit and watch people, and you can see them looking away, tapping away on the screen, and you think, that's a problem. This is not a team of people. This is just a bunch of people who've got together to sort of say things and then go away again. And there were all sorts of issues between this group of human beings. Now, that's not unusual. I'm not being disrespectful. I'm not saying it's a bad or good example. It's just normal, right? When you work together, you get thrown together with people. You don't typically choose who you work with. And so you get thrown together. And so where empathy turns up is in me helping teams often to simply get to know each other better. So we show, and I can show it in a minute if you want, we have a thing we call a relationship ladder. And empathy, and one of the reasons you and I first spoke was because I've been speaking about empathy for a long time. And when I learned about Empathy Week, I was right behind it, because it's something, it's a big passion for me, because it sits on this relationship ladder. But it sits at a relatively high place on the relationship ladder. What sits beneath there, I'll show you in a minute, are two stages that I call inquiry and curiosity. Because you see, empathy is a genuine thing. I've heard you talk about it many times, both privately and publicly. And to be empathetic takes a genuine sense of seeing the world through another's eyes. And you want to see the world through another's eyes, you're going to have to ask them some questions. And you're going to have to be genuinely interested in their point of view. If you're not genuinely interested in their point of view and their lived experience and the way that they see the world, you'll never be empathetic. Not genuinely. I mean, you can tell somebody you empathize with them, you can tell them you understand them, but they don't really mean it. I've sat in meetings with people over the years where the person says, yeah, no, I understand, yeah, I get it. I think they think they're empathizing with me. I think they are. They're definitely not. They just want to talk.
Yeah.
And so if I get back to this example, what hasn't happened with this team, but it's incredibly normal, is they haven't asked each other just some basic questions. They just don't really know each other. And I'm not saying we've all got to, go for a walk in the woods and, find out about, our childhood and all that. I just mean we need to be interested in each other. We need to be. It's not like a nice to do. It's a need to do. You and I spent 10, 15 minutes before today's webinar just catching up with each other because we haven't spoken for a while. Yeah, I mean, you asked me what do you do for Christmas, and we haven't even spoken since then, and just chatting about some stuff. Why? You don't care what I did at Christmas any more than I care what you did. You care about the relationship. That's what you care about. And so you made an investment in the relationship by being interested in something that I was interested in. And that's curiosity. Curiosity is the desire to be interested in something that someone else is interested in and to really commit to it. Think about your best friend in the world. Your best friend in the world has got some interests that you're probably not interested in, truly, that it's not a passion for you.
Yeah, definitely.
But you ask your best friend about it because the relationship matters to you and you're invested in that relationship. And so you invest more in it by asking them questions and showing interest in them. My best mate is a West Ham fan. I'm neither especially interested in football nor especially interested in West Ham. But I ask him questions about how West Ham's doing because he cares about it.
Which he might actually be annoyed at sometimes.
Exactly.
Doesn't want you to ask them. Yeah.
So that's how it turns up. It turns up in the most surprisingly of basic ways, which is helping groups of very often very senior leaders to simply build better relationships, as a result be better able to communicate, as a result be better able to make good decisions, and as a result better able to lead their businesses.
Amazing. And actually that was high on my list of questions, was and I didn't know whether I'd be cheeky and asking to see it, but I think it's a perfect time to see it, because I think this model, I remember you explaining it to me and I being like, it just makes perfect sense, and it explains it in such a detailed but also simple way. I think you should be able to share. Yeah, perfect. So here we go. So yeah, and actually at first I was like, empathy is the top, and then I saw this and I went, oh, it's in the middle. But then with your explanation, it makes perfect sense. So we've gone from inquiry to curiosity, and then we get to empathy, and then the bits that come afterwards, I don't know if you want to delve into those a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So, I mean, I won't go through the whole thing, right? But and people feel free to take a picture of it, or even send me a note, and I'll send you a copy of it. But this thing's got +1 to 5, -1 to -5, and they're mirror images of each other. So the reason we represent it like this sort of diamond-shaped ladder is because the opposite of inquiry is apathy. The opposite of curiosity is resistance. The opposite of empathy is defensiveness. And so, in theory, the 1 to 5s are the antidotes for the -1 to -5s. If you encounter somebody who behaves in one of these ways, the theoretical antidote to it are the things that are above. Now, most people's eyes will immediately go to hostility and combat down the bottom, and you kind of go, what, somebody who's hostile or combative with me, I'm supposed to just kind of lie back and, be tolerant and compromising. Now, let's be really clear, this is a model for normal communication, right? I am not suggesting we should be tolerant of unacceptable behaviours. Very, very, very far from it. But what I am suggesting is sometimes we get a bit antsy with each other. You'll have it with family members, or even with your best mates, or sometimes your teachers are feeling a little bit because of all sorts of things that are going on, and we have to be tolerant. We do. But to get to tolerance, you've got to have empathy first. Otherwise, it's fake tolerance. You don't really mean it. So each one of these is a pathway to the next. Inquiring people have the opportunity to be curious. Curious people have the opportunity to be empathetic. Empathetic people, the opportunity to be tolerant. And tolerant people, the opportunity to compromise. And we compromise in our lives every day. It's not a bad thing. It's a normal thing. When our politicians do a good job, they compromise. When they do a bad job, they're narrow-minded and they fight for issues blindly. Life is not simple. We all know that. Whatever age you are watching this, you know your life's not simple. And so the better we listen to each other, the better we see things through others' eyes, the better we adapt our thinking, the more likely it is they'll have highly performing relationships. You see, my thing is about highly performing relationships in both your private life and your professional life, if you've got one. That's what I'm interested in. And I think empathy is an enormous step on this journey. Of the 1 to 5, it's the big enabler. Because being curious and inquiring, it's just a sort of, you just do that, right? That's just asking questions. I mean, it's kind of easier. Empathy is the big mindset shift. Empathy is, oh my goodness, I never knew you saw the world like that. I never knew that was your lived experience. Wow, okay, now I see things differently. I took my daughters, I have a 21-year-old and a 19-year-old. I also have a business in India. And I took my girls to India when they were sort of 14 and 16, and we went and spent some time in a girls' orphanage in Delhi. And they had never had any kind of experience like that. They had no sense of that. They intellectually could understand it. They'd seen stuff on telly, but they'd never seen that kind of experience. We went to an apartment that had 15 girls in it, aged between 6 and 16, who were all orphans and who were some of the most joyful, positive people my girls had ever met. And we have talked about those those girls in the years since hundreds of times, because they had an experience of people who'd had a life that is unimaginably different to their own, and yet were full of joy and hope and optimism and positivity. And making sense of that was an empathetic journey that I think was really important for them. And it was just as important for me too, by the way. I learned at least as much as they did, if not more. Anyway, that's the relationship ladder. People are welcome to use it and to think about it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It makes me think. Or every time I look at it, it makes me think, and I do actually visit it even when I'm not talking to you. And would you believe that? Because I think it is just like you say, it's useful in personal and professional lives. And I think there's an element here which has been brought up in talks in the series so far as well, of vulnerability. How important is vulnerability in almost as an enabler as well in relationships? What's your experience with vulnerability? Because I'm sure you've come across teams who are just no, like, that's my personal. I'm not opening that door, and other teams that are like, okay, I didn't know I needed to do that. What's your experience with vulnerability, and how can it be used?
Great
positives
question.
and negatives.
So there's a few different things there. Teams are not vulnerable or invulnerable, only people are. Teams are just an abstract collection of people, right? So I mean, it's not like a sports team. A sports team is a real team. You need each other. In organizations, mostly, a team is a group of people who've got the same boss. And sometimes they really need each other, and sometimes they don't. The very first team I worked in was a sales team. We had one sales manager. To be honest, what the other people in the team didn't make any difference to me at all. I was really only interested in the relationship with him. As soon as I moved on, then I started to work in teams where I really needed each other. You ask about vulnerability. It's a super question because vulnerability is so important. We talk about a concept that we call confident vulnerability. Confident vulnerability. Now, those two things sound like they are opposing each other, but they're really not. They complement each other brilliantly. And the best global example I can give you of that right now is the leader of New Zealand, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, a woman called Jacinda Ardern. If you haven't ever heard of Jacinda, go and look her up and go and watch her speak. And she's the most phenomenal leader. This is not a political statement, but the way that she leads is just about the most human way of any leader in the world. She's my current favorite world leader because she communicates with humility, with vulnerability, but she is confident. She's led her country through not just the pandemic, but a dreadful terrorist atrocity in Christchurch. And she has led her country through it with integrity, with honor, with respect, in a way that I in my 51 years on this planet, I've never seen a leader do that before. And she sets a new standard. She sets, for me, a gold standard of confident vulnerability. Vulnerability doesn't mean telling everybody about your family or your deep, dark secrets or your biggest fears. It doesn't mean that. It means to be normal about what you're good and what you're not so good at. I've got loads of frailties, maybe even Ed has as well. I mean, probably not as many as me, but we've all got
a few.
Yeah, we've all got things we could be better at. And the confidence to be open about that is actually really great. Because there are other politicians in the world who, and maybe some that are not too far from where you and I are right now, Ed, who go, no, I've got this worked out and I know exactly what I'm doing and I'm absolutely definite and it's all going to go well. And then when it doesn't, they don't have the humility to say, yeah, I know I was really confident about that, but it didn't quite work out. Sorry about that. Like, I did it with the best of intentions. They don't say that. They just move on from it as if we're all stupid and have somehow forgotten. People don't forget. It damages your credibility if you are not willing to say, I tried something, I thought it was going to work out, and it didn't. And I'm sorry. I was wrong. Right? It's okay to be wrong. It's absolutely okay to be wrong. What isn't okay is to be wrong and not admit to it, because everybody knows. And that's the opposite of vulnerability, invulnerability. We often talk to leaders in business about taking off their cloak of invulnerability. Leaders do have to be confident. Leaders do have to lead us with passion and purpose and conviction and belief. There's no problem with that. It's a tremendous thing to have. But blind conviction, blind confidence, which we really call arrogance, damages you very significantly. It damages relationships. It damages your career prospects, if that's what you're into, and your friendship groups. It just causes enormous damage. So yeah, vulnerability, confident vulnerability is a real passion of mine. I often work on it individually with leaders because it's quite a hard thing to explore as a team. But the ability of individual leaders to just open up a little bit, especially to their closest colleagues, it's huge. You want a great example? Watch Jacinda Ardern. It's amazing.
Yeah, and it definitely links to authenticity as well. I think which we've talked about. Being your authentic self. It doesn't mean opening everything, but it is about. I suppose it builds trust, and people. God, if don't want to get political, but if a leader in our country, went, do you know what, got some stuff wrong, can't do anything about it, but this is what we're going to do moving forward. Trust levels would increase, respect would increase, and it's not rocket science. It's quite simple, but it's hard for some people to do.
You're absolutely right. Authenticity is a good one. Just a quick note on authenticity. Authenticity, by the way, though, is not an excuse for being a grumpy git. So, I have a lot of leaders who say to me, if I'm working with them and they're being a bit, grumpy or awkward, they go, oh, I'm just being authentic. I've learned that being authentic is very important. They use authenticity like a weapon. Authenticity is not a weapon. When you are working with others, particularly in whatever your chosen career might be, or you're working with a community, or you're working on a project with a group of friends or other pupils, authenticity is about being you on a really good day. Being you on a really good day. And being you on a really good day as often as you can. And being you on a really good day takes a bit of effort some days. Some days you're going to get up and you're going to feel a bit grumpy with the world. And you might have an argument with somebody in your house. And you might not have a very good journey into school or work. And you might, have a bit of an issue with your form teacher or your boss or whoever it is. And authenticity is about shaking that off and going, right, I'm not going to let that stuff get me. I'm going to be me on a really good day. That's what I learned in my early years of work were, my life was complicated, my life was challenging, I had all sorts of things that weren't going very well. And my ability to shake those off, to be resilient, as you talk about with Empathy Week a lot, and to move forward with my life with confidence and optimism and positivity and caring about other people is been the greatest trajectory, the greatest ignition for my life. To just decide, I'm going to be me on a really good day, and I'm going to try and have as many really good days as possible. Like every day, right? Some days you're going to be down. Some of you might be feeling down now, being at home so much, being away from your mates so much. You might have all sorts of worries and anxieties, and there's loads of help for that out there, and you should go and get that help. But for those of you who are lucky enough not to have those issues, you've got to be you on a really good day. Apart from anything else, you'll be able to really help the people who are having kind of bad days. And that's important to see too.
Yeah, a great point. And I'd never even thought about that being used as a weapon. But yeah, I can see how it could easily be used. And I think that's for people also that maybe don't want to change their ways, or, just want to go on the route that they want to go on. We've got a few minutes left. I've got one question for you that I was pondering, because I haven't been in a senior executive boardroom meeting. But what are the similarities between a classroom and a senior boardroom? What would you say the similarities, and how would you compare the two?
What a brilliant question. What an absolutely brilliant question, because I had never in my life considered that there might be similarities, but as you wisely ask and you imply in your question, there really, really are, right? There really are. Why? Because it's a room full of human beings. Doesn't matter what age you are, right? Some of us get on and some of us don't. When you look around your classroom, you've got a few mates around you and you've got a few people who you don't quite see eye to eye with, right? Who don't have the same point of view as yours, who think differently, who believe in different things. Maybe you've even had the odd argument with some of them, right? And that's the same in every room of human beings everywhere in the world. And our challenge, whether you're, 11 or 65, is to be able to get past that stuff, is to be able to build the strength, build the tools, build the superpowers that mean you can work with anybody, anywhere, in any situation. Whether they're a prince or a pauper, you can work with people, you can build relationships with people. And the world belongs to people who can do that, who can see past difference, who can see past the daft things we say to each other sometimes that we don't mean, but that somehow get taken out of context and somehow get misunderstood. And those of you that can step above that and can build superpower tools like empathy, don't be in any doubt in your life, wherever you are in your life, empathy is a superpower. Probably one of the greatest superpowers humanity's ever been offered. And if you can develop that, even with your biggest enemy, even with the person you think, I am never going to get on with them, just can't see the world the way they see it. If you can do it with them, the world belongs to you, because the world is moving increasingly towards common issues. We live on the same planet. The countries we live in are irrelevant. We're all living on the same planet. We've got the same problems. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that we are all in this, on this little tiny speck of the universe together. And we got to understand each other. And yeah, sometimes we behave weirdly, but we got to make it work. And that's the same in boardrooms. Your question is, how's it similar? And it's the same. Might not be quite so obvious, might be all quite polite sometimes, and everybody's very, apparently very nice to each other, but never doubt, there are issues underlying, sometimes not very deeply underlying. That doesn't mean every boardroom's like that. We're very lucky in this country, particularly in this part of the world. We've got some amazing organisations. We are very lucky to have access to those organisations in this part of the world. Indeed, in most parts of the world, business education has moved on enormously in the last 20 to 30 years, largely as a result of many other Empathy Week ambassadors who work tirelessly every day to make that happen for businesses. And businesses have moved on enormously. That's why I said to you at the beginning that I do think organisations are much more acknowledging of the fact that it's not just about education, but it's about relationship skills. And so I fear organisations are getting better and better at it, and my opportunities for work might be reducing over time, but hopefully I'll just about retire by the time everybody's got it worked out.
I think, as you said, everyone's human, so I don't think you're ever going to be out of work.
Maybe not.
One last question, which is kind of away from everything. It's a very human question, maybe. Is the world becoming a better place? So
there's a fantastic book called Factfulness. I don't know if you've come across Factfulness.
I haven't read it, but I have heard
it's an amazing book written by a Danish author who sadly passed away the year before last. And in Factfulness, the line is, the world can be bad and better. So things can be bad and better. And it's a brilliant phrase. On most measures, pandemic aside, on most measures, the world's getting better, right? The world's becoming a better place. Now, climate crisis is real and is terrifying, and what we're doing to our oceans and our atmosphere and our natural resources and the natural world around us is truly horrifying. But I am an optimist, and I believe by concentrating on it, we will get on top of it. And I'm a believer in us getting on top of that. by most other metrics, the world is slowly getting better. Now, any child that dies in poverty, anybody that doesn't get access to clean water, until there is not a single person on this planet who suffers an injustice because of the colour of their skin or because they don't have access to education, until there is not a single person like that, the world will be able to be a better place. But do I think it's getting better? Well, I do, but I'm a middle-aged white man and, living in sleepy south of the UK. And so I may not be best positioned in the world to opine on that fact. But what I can say is that I'm going to use my privilege every day to be able to make the world a better place. And I think that's beholden upon all of us, is to find a way to serve the world. It's okay to serve yourself too, right? It's not a bad thing to serve yourself too. It's not a bad thing to have ambition and to want things and to want to be able to make something of yourself. That's not a bad thing. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's a bad thing to only do that. And we have had an awakening in the world, I think, that we have a responsibility as a member of humanity to leave this world in a better place than we found it. And irrespective of your situation, I think that's our responsibility. And that's why I think what you do in Empathy Week is such genius, because I hope it inspires it in every single person who watches this and all of the other amazing webinars to make their contribution to this world and to keep making it a better place. But short answer, I'm always going to say I think it's getting better. It's been an interesting year. But we got better days ahead of us. I've no doubt about that.
Amazing. What a way to end. And I love that bit about using your privilege, identify what privilege you do have, but then don't sit on it, use it in whatever way you can to help other people. Matt, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your stories. It's very inspiring for me, even to hear things that I haven't heard before from you. I'm sure people listening will really enjoy it. But how could they reach out to you if they had a question or wanted to see the work that you're doing? Where could they find you?
So my chosen poison is LinkedIn. So come and find me on LinkedIn. If you're old enough to have a profile on there, come and catch me on LinkedIn. If not, you'll find me on the Empathy Week website. Very proud to be associated with Empathy Week as an ambassador, so you can track me down from there. My website is positivemomentum.com, so positivemomentum, all one word.com. You'll find me there too. Delighted to answer questions and to debate some of these fascinating subjects with anybody who wants to.
Amazing. Matt, thank you again. Thank you to everyone that's watching, listening, and see you soon. Cheers, Matt.
Thanks, Dave.